It's nice to be able to have the questions and stuff in the chat, though. I like that.
Right, right. Well, I see it's 1 o'clock, so I'm going to introduce myself. Joellen will introduce herself, but if you're just coming in now, we're asking you to use the chat liberally, introduce yourself. Maybe let us know what institution you're from, what you do, what you teach, and what you're hoping to get out of this session. So I'm Robin Schofield. I teach English at Pikes Peak Community College. I'm also the director of high impact practices at Pikes Peak, and high impact practices are just teaching strategies that are highly associated, positively associated with equitable results for students. Joellen?
Yes, and I'm Joellen Becko, and I also am an English professor at Pikes Peak. I've been at Pikes Peak Community College for 16 years, and I really love it. I also serve as the director of high impact practices, so we are a partnership, and we have had the privilege of working with the faculty at Pikes Peak and staff to really shift our culture there. So we're really excited to have all of you here to hear a little bit about what we're doing, to see if it might be something that you could, you know, encourage at your own campuses. So Robin's gonna kind of take over the presentation piece. We're gonna start at the end, like the results, and then work you backwards a little bit, which just be aware that we don't assume you know everything about what high impact practices are, but with 45 minutes, we've got to run for the hills here. So if you have questions, put it in the chat. I'll be watching that pretty closely. So thanks for being here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. And Joellen and I have presented a lot together, and so she'll be in there. If you have a question, she may just answer you. Or she might interrupt me as I steamroll through the material, and we can have a conversation about it. So don't be shy. Put your questions in there, thoughts. That's a big part of what we're doing today. As Joellen mentioned, we're going to talk about some of the theoretical data points first, and then we are going to discuss practical stuff for teachers and give you some ideas of what you might use in the classroom. Just as we were getting started here, before 1 o'clock, I was noticing in the chat, a lot of you enjoyed the keynote speaker. And so I took some notes because it was so closely aligned with high impact practices. High impact practices produce social emotional experiences. They increase a student's sense of belonging in college. They give real world application for concepts being learned in the classroom. And so I loved the love, how do you design with care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, trust. The life, how do you affirm the legitimacy of unique perspectives and experiential knowledge. And especially love the liberation part, because in high impact practices, students really are learning to learn. There's a real strong emphasis on metacognitive reflective thinking. And so students learn to become learners themselves, and they also learn to think for themselves. There's a lot of choice involved and a lot of ownership, a lot of relational qualities with high impact practices. So here we go, put your seatbelts on. So we began almost every day with this question. I do. I think a lot of you do too, which is, what's at stake in our work? Who are we thinking about? Why do we do the job we do? What do we hope to accomplish? When I ask these questions, or sometimes we put it in the terms of what's my why? What's my motivation? It helps me to recenter myself, because of course there's a blitz of other things going on. And as educators, we want to enter the classroom with what's at stake in mind, with why do I do what I do in mind. So this picture was taken at Pikes Peak Community College. We have about 25% of our students are either active duty veteran or spouses, dependents of military. And so I believe this soldier is probably picking up his child from our child development center that we have at the college and heading back to his life. And so I think about students all the time, that school is there for really for their betterment, for their families, for their future, but it's also there for all the rest of us. So, you know, cities and communities and societies benefit as people are able to reach their dreams and so on. So we wanted to ask you all a question, and I don't know if it's already in the chat, but we wanted to know why you do what you do. And we'd love to hear from you there. And Joellen, as I move forward, if you want to share any of those, just let me know. All right. So high impact practices were first published about in 2008 by a man named George Koo, who did research based on the National Survey of Student Engagement. And we have what's called the CSSE, it's the Community College Survey of Student Engagement at our institutions. It helps us know what students' perspectives are on how they're engaged in the classroom and at the college. And so his study went backwards to see if a student reported doing service learning, for example. Did they get better grades? Did they persist to the next semester? Were they retained from fall to fall? Did they graduate? Those kinds of things. And so what he found were that there are certain practices that if students get to participate in them, they are positively associated with college success. He also found that for populations of students who have been historically underrepresented in student success measures, that these practices had what he called compensatory effects. And it simply means that a student who might have historically not succeeded, they're actually accelerating past the other students who have historically been more successful in college. And so we're going to show you some data around that for Pikes Peak Community College, but nationally, this has been borne out with research. And basically, if a student has the opportunity to participate in a high impact practice, they do better in college. We also looked at a 2013 article on assessing equity in colleges through high impact practices. And the Center for Urban Education set up a framework for assessing that. And so we're going to share a little bit of our data on that assessment as well. So here's what we are looking at, and these are equity issues, and this is a bit of a big picture. So if you are a faculty leader in instructional innovation and pedagogy at your institution, this may interest you quite a bit. If you're an administrator, I'm guessing it will also interest you. So we have equity measures, and what we're looking at is scale and quality. And so we set the idea that engaging experiences are not just for a select few students. And we want high impact practices to be unavoidable for students. That means entry-level courses. That means their first semester in college, as opposed to situations, if you think about a four-year university, undergraduate research is competitive and it comes later in the student's experience. And so for a community college, we didn't want that to be the case. We wanted all students to have access. So we looked at representation in these courses, meaning did all of the student populations and student indicators, were they equal in the high impact practice courses, same as non-high impact practice courses. And we also looked at access. What campuses are we offering these courses on? What disciplines are offering these courses and experiences? And then we also looked at faculty participation, because we wanted to scale at a high level so that it wasn't up to, oh, if I get a full-time faculty member, then I might have this experience, as opposed to maybe a new faculty member or a part-time instructor. So we really have pushed that pretty quickly. And so we have 61% pre-pandemic participation in high impact practices. Why is that an equity issue? It's an issue, equity issue, because now students, every student walking into our institution has this opportunity to take a high impact practice course. Secondly, we looked at quality because we don't want someone just to say, I'm doing something that's supposed to benefit students, but it's not really doing that. So we want it to benefit every student. So we are looking at impact. If it's high impact, it should show impact. So HIPS increase success measures for all students, especially underrepresented students. So look at pass rates, semester to semester persistence, and fall to fall retention. All right, if you're not asleep yet, I'm not a super number person, but it's so motivating as an educator to kind of get the, what would you call it, the shortcut to what works for students. Joellen, anything in the chat?
No, just beautiful, awesome, fabulous goals that we covered. So
fabulous.
Thanks
Okay.
for sharing.
All right. And I gotta get back to this. Here we go. So the why of HIPS is obvious now, I'm hoping. It increases student learning and success for all students. It's an equity practice. And we have equity results that we want to share with you. So our institutional research led by Dr. Patricia Diawara did a study to see what the impact was on our students. And so we compared, again, same student characteristics, and we compared students who took at least one high impact practice course with students who took no high impact practice courses. And I'm going to repeat this just so that it's fresh in your mind. High impact practices are just simply a pedagogy. It's just a way you're designing something in your course. And so what we found was for last fall, 2019 to spring of 2020, we saw a 7 percentage point increase for persistence. So if they were in classes in the fall, 7% higher number went to classes in the spring. That, if you are following statistics at your institution, you know that's really, really high. To get a bump of 7% is really, really high. But what really brought tears to our eyes was to see the impact that George Koo promised, which was that compensatory effects. So for our Black students from fall 2019 to spring 2020, we saw an 18% bump increase in persistence for that student group. So that was really heartening to us because we knew the national data, but we wanted to see if we were doing it well, if it was really meaning something for our students. And it is. I'll also say that one of the criticisms sometimes of high impact practices is that it's only for elite schools or schools that have residency programs where you can really kind of push these students into doing these kinds of activities. Whereas at a community college, where it's needed the most, sometimes it doesn't stick, or it's never attempted. And so, so that was great news this last fall. Even after spring pandemic, we saw a fall to fall retention increase of 14% compared with students that did not take a high impact practice course. This other number is good, but it's a little disappointing because we want to see students of color outpace the total student group, but it's still fabulous. It's 11% increase in fall to fall retention for students of color. It's all of these results are highly statistically significant. In case you're a social scientist out there, we did have a very robust student group to do this data study. So I hope you're heartened the way I am to know that these practices work for students and they work for our students.
I'm going to answer, you can go ahead to the next one if you like, but I will answer this question. So Paige asked, were the HIPS versus non-HIP student groups randomized in some way, and I'm wondering how students were self-selecting. So students just sign up for courses, some, very few, but some students are actually looking for a high impact practice course. But we have a reporting system, so the faculty reports what high impact, if they're using high impact practices, and what particular high impact practice they're using. And we use actually the CRN, so the course registration. Then we're able to do that deep dive where this class is reporting no HIPS and this class is reporting HIPS. So that's how the groups were identified. I think that answers your question. Paige, feel free to pop more clarity if you need more clarity, or we can talk to you offline. And we can go much
deeper. Just rest assured, these are all valid, tested, and highly statistically significant. So the student types are the same in the classes. The students did not self-select. We've got CTE compared with CTE. We've got transfer compared with transfer. You got to meet Patricia Diawara. She's
awesome.
The queen of data. So yeah, I think any probably question you have along the lines of validity that has been addressed. We just also wanted to show with you kind of the breakdown of this persistent 7% persistent rate from semester to semester. And really what this shows is that this works for all the students. So we have first time anywhere, transfer, readmit, AAAS, CTE, first generation students, gender, age, veterans, and then we have it broken down by race, ethnicity. You'll see there that it was really impactful for Black male students, a 27% increase. So yay, we found something that really, really, really works. And so what we'd love to talk with you all about, first of all, actually, I think there's a reflective question, Joellen, you putting that in the chat. We just wanted to ask you, like, how's that make you feel? Like, what do you think of this data?
Yeah. I posted it almost simultaneously.
We do that. We finish each other's sentences. So let me know, and I'm going to keep going. All right. So we're transitioning now a little more to the practical and a little more to the what and the how. And so this is a picture of some social work students. We started a mobile food market at our college after we learned from the Hope Research Center that college students are food insecure and housing insecure in really, really high numbers. And so the mobile food market was not only a great service to students, but it was a great service to our college community and to social work students and service learning students. So a number of professors organized their students to volunteer at our mobile food market. And we wanted to create a volunteer system so that people would feel dignified. So if they wanted food, they could also volunteer if they felt like it, and be side to side and with others in this. So these social work students learned a lot about practical concepts in their social work courses, and they also took ownership. So we did one mobile food market, and the next one, it was a little colder outside, and they set up a table with hats and gloves for children because students were bringing their children to the mobile food market. And as you can kind of see in the corner of this picture, they're having to stand outside a little bit. We did move it indoors for the colder months, but I thought that was great. Nobody told them to do that. They just went and did it. And that's kind of the beauty of high impact practices, is you design a project, you design an assignment, you design something for students to do that helps them to connect with their course content, with their college. They get a sense that they matter and they belong at college, and with themselves. It can be very helpful in terms of testing out their career trajectory, or even discovering something that they're good at that they want to keep doing. Okay, so for those of you who have been very, very lost about what high impact practices are, This slide is for you. High impact practices, as George Koo initially envisioned them, are these 10 practices. And again, he did this from the college student survey of engagement. And so these were practices that already existed. So we're not really creating anything new. Of course, service learning and collaborative projects and undergraduate research have been around for many decades. But what he found out is that these particular kinds of projects and practices really, really engage students. And student engagement equals better grades, better persistence, graduation. I wouldn't say equals, is it closely associated with those kinds of things. So service learning, collaborative projects, undergraduate research, writing intensive. There's also a kind of a quantitative intensive, though of course that would probably scare any student to hear it's quantitative intensive, but it's for math classes and it has many of the same practices that a writing intensive would have, which is recursive, reflective, and those sorts of things. Diversity global learning, common intellectual experiences, first year experience, learning communities, capstone projects, and internships. Since George Koo initially published his work, e-portfolios have been added to the list. So we're curious, have you been doing any of these things or a slight version of it? What's your experience?
And I did post the question in there.
Super.
Good. George Koo is the author of the first, so, and it's K-U-H, and I'll pop it in here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm going to share one service learning project I've done. I teach English, and so we simply adopted a paper that we do that's a proposal or a letter of advocacy, however you want to look at it. My students, and so with service learning, the key is you use something in the course that the students are learning as a benefit out in the community. And so my students had to write a proposal or a letter of advocacy to a local person or organization that had the power to affect change. And so they would get to pick what they were doing. So I usually would say, you know, think about something that really you're passionate about or makes you mad. But it has to be somewhat local so that you can actually send your writing out to a real and specific audience to try to change something in your community through your writing. And students, part of this was doing an interview, whether it was email interview or a phone interview or in person. And it was interesting to see students pushed outside the classroom a little bit. Felt a little intimidating at first, but we created a really nice writing community. And so they would share with each other, and we'd actually have days where they would maybe make a phone call or write an email in class so that they could share the experience with their group. The really cool part of this is that students would, they'd really pick things that they're passionate about in the community. They'd make a connection with a person or a group, and they often get a response. And so they got to see that their writing could actually do something, that their voice mattered in their community. My favorite example is a student who was working at a downtown restaurant as a waitress, and she was really mad. We spend a whole day talking about what we're mad about. Mad that they were throwing the food away. And she just felt like with so much food insecurity, how could that happen? So she did research on it. She found out it's actually legal to donate. And she also did some more research, found an organization that would actually go and pick it up and distribute it to food centers. And so food pantries. And so she wrote this letter to her employer and they changed their policy. So as simple as that, my student's not going to forget that moment in her education because it did so much more for her as a person to connect with the curriculum, to connect with the college, and to connect with herself.
We get reports over and over about the power of these projects. And we have a pretty robust student survey for anybody who's reporting using high impact practices. The students report, and we get to really see their and hear their voice beyond just the data points, because I'm much more into the narrative story piece of it. And here's another example that Robin's going to share.
Yeah. So if you want to think about high impact practices like this, it may be helpful because you might realize you may be doing one of these things. So high impact practices make students do things. So they're projects with purpose connected to people. This is a poster from a faculty member who assigned a high impact practice assignment. And it was essentially kind of a public service announcement, an awareness campaign. That was the direction they were going with it. And so a student, instead of writing just a paper based on research of people they didn't know on homelessness and just turning it into their faculty member, they actually did that research and then they did some interviews with fellow students who are homeless or who have been homeless. And it was affirming to all of the students involved. And now there was a purpose to the project because they were entrusted really with this message to their peers at the college that homelessness is our problem, that college students are homeless. And then we have a number of avenues for students to publish and share what they've discovered through their projects. And I'm going to talk about that in just a second. I put here times 385 students because last fall, that's how many students were in a high impact practice course. And I like to think about the possible trajectory of learning, like with the first slide, a parent with his child, it impacts the family, it might impact generations, it might impact the neighborhood or the community. But how about this student who did this project, awareness project? Not only were the students that they interviewed impacted, they were impacted, the people, the students and our college community who saw this presentation were impacted. And then you multiply that by 3,805 students. It's kind of powerful. So that's why the number.
There's, I'm just gonna say in the chat, there's some back and forth, like, and I think it's a valid concern about how do I fit this in, how the time constraints and so forth. And I think that that's the first natural reaction to these things. But I will say that the faculty who have taken it on and tweaked, and we're not talking about revamping whole courses, it's little tweaks about the same project you have, but adding this other piece to it. And it's faculty are reporting being so much more invigorated by their teaching. They feel like connected to the students. They feel like the students see the value and so forth. So we've got lots of help ideas with that sort of thing too. We just don't have time today, but I totally validate your concerns.
Yeah. So what I did, just so you know, and since I teach English, it made sense to attach this to a paper that they would write anyway. And all I did was change a few elements of it to allow for this to be a project. It did not take, this particular, for me, didn't take any more time than any other paper that my students would be working on. So I would say start with something you're already doing that you like, that you think engages students. And then I'm glad we're at this slide, because this is the metric for whether you're doing a high impact practice or not. And so I'm going to go through these, and what I'd really love for you to do, and Joellen may be putting this in the chat, is think about that assignment that you really like. And as I'm explaining each one of these, it may simply be that you just have a little add-on, a little change here, rather than designing a whole new something. So let me jump in. In 2013, Ken O'Donnell and George Koo wrote another article about the 8 elements of high impact practices. We think of these as like, what's the magic? Why do these work? And these are the 8 reasons that high impact practices work. It's really nice because it's a breakdown where you can look at what you're assigning in your class and say, oh, okay, I've got these 7 elements. If I just add in one more, that will increase the impact and the engagement for students. So the first is challenge. And that's simply setting your expectations at appropriately high levels. I think of it as those projects where students are like, man, I worked harder than I thought I could. Or maybe they're reporting a sense of ownership in a new way. So challenge can be different, obviously, for each discipline, but think about those questions. What's the energy level of the students around the project or the assignment that you're assigning? Do they have opportunities to make choices and to maybe show some leadership or ownership, at least, in their choices? We also have time, which is closely related. And so it's the idea that it would be something that spans most of the semester, or maybe a full month of the semester. The reason for that is that students putting in time and effort, that engages them, especially if it is a purposeful project. And so think about, how can I stretch out, not necessarily what you're doing as a faculty member, but what the student is doing over time. The second set is interactive. And so this is the idea that students are having substantive interactions with each other. It's a little bit of that shoulder to shoulder, we're doing this together. And it can even be done on individual projects. So the one I gave as an example, these are all individual projects, but because they were all doing them together, they would meet in groups and in teams and talk about, where they were advancing and what their struggles were and those sorts of things. They very much felt like they were in it together. And especially when we started getting responses back, which we shared with the classroom, everyone was invested in the fact that people in the community were communicating with our class. It's also interactive with the faculty member. In many ways, you become a coach in this project in a way that you might not otherwise in an academic endeavor. The fourth one here is diversity, and that's a one word for a lot of things. It's the idea that students are learning from diverse others, or students are learning from circumstances or people that are different for them, that they're not used to being around, or maybe don't feel comfortable with. Well, I think most of you know, you walk into a community college classroom and you have immediate diversity. And so it's really just on us as educators is kind of explaining the dynamics of that. I loved a session I went to talking about giving voice to unique lived experiences. And so students get to do that with each other. We get to do that together in the classroom. And again, the goal is that students would learn from diversity. Feedback. This is a broad scope of feedback. And so it's really, as an educator, thinking there's so many ways students can get feedback, not just my formal evaluation. And so they get feedback from each other. They get verbal, nonverbal feedback. They get, like a peer review type of situation. They get feedback when they're actually presenting their work publicly. It can be eye contact. It could be folded arms. And so the feedback, just thinking about that as you're designing At what points will the students know that they're doing well? At what points will the students know that they're on track? So your feedback is just one little piece of that. Reflection, and that's the metacognitive. Students are thinking about what is my process in this project? What am I learning? How does what I'm learning apply to maybe some of my future goals? How does what I'm learning apply to my lived experience? So reflection can come in at any point in the project. But this is huge. I would say if you're looking at these, this is a big one, to design, helping the students connect, to make meaning out of their learning, to be co-creators with you of meaning of their learning in the classroom and outside. So there's a lot of, we have a whole presentation on reflection, but that's my short little bit. Real world. If you are a career technical educator, you have this in spades, you're already doing it. But for some of us in the transfer disciplines, it's really great to think about how can I help the student take what they're learning in the classroom and use it somewhere out there outside the classroom. And so that's the real world application. And then the last one is public demonstration of competence. That's the idea that the student gets to share what they've learned, share findings. And you probably noticed that we have undergraduate research as one of the high impact practices. Certainly at a four-year institution, Research One institution, it's going to look different than it does at the community college. So we're really looking for undergraduate research experiences. And that can happen in any classroom. And if the student has sort of a purposeful topic for them and they're doing the research and they know they're going to share their findings with someone besides the instructor or the faculty member, it really ups their investment and their ownership over their own learning. It can be scary to share your work publicly. Joellen and I have designed something called the Expo. And so it's just a PowerPoint template where the student fills in their findings. And so it doesn't have to be a speech that they're giving in front of people. It can be shared through publication and many different venues.
And I have put in a couple times, and I'll keep putting it in, how to get to the Pikes Peak website for HIPS with much more definition and links out to other things. So, and our emails and all that good stuff. So we're giving you the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, and we're almost done too, just so you know.
Yeah.
And so this is broken down into how do HIPS work. We take those 8 elements and we've kind of conflate them into 4 learning objectives. And so students rise to a challenge, students learn from others, students improve performance. That's the idea of that ability to go back and reflect on what you're learning and have the opportunity to make it better. So that's feedback and reflection. And then students apply learning to real situations. I just wanted to mention quickly here, this student is a Pikes Peak Community College student who is presenting at CSURF, which is Colorado Springs Undergraduate Research Forum. She's in there with students from the Air Force Academy, from Colorado College, from UCCS, and she's in there showing her findings, talking to one of the attendees about what she's done. And that's so exciting because she's rising to a challenge, she's learning from others, she's improving her performance, she's applying her learning to real situations. And you kind of get to see it happening right there in her public demonstration of competence. So we're super proud of our students. We really love them, and so many students are achieving great things for themselves and for their communities through high impact practices.
And I think it has to be said, just because I have to say it, our faculty are amazing.
Yes, true that.
True that.
This
And I'm
is the
sure
last-
you all are too.
Yeah, you know you are because you're here. This is the last slide. So I thought, okay, we'll take one of the high impact practices, and I chose diversity global learning because this is a equity-minded teaching conference, and I thought it might resonate with a number of us. And so we have as an example here that DGL courses include course content. I attended a really good one, and if you have a chance to watch the recording of it, it was the first session. It was on online learning, and they really talked a lot about course content. Here I've abbreviated it. It's your choices about texts, voices. It's your topic choices. So some of us have that where it's innate in our course. If we teach anthropology or sociology, we're already teaching diversity global learning. Some of us don't have it as innate, but we can imbue our content with these choices. So for me, for example, I teach writing. I can choose texts, and I can choose topics, and I can allow the students to choose topics that resonate with diversity global learning. Then there's the project. It needs to be a real world project, something you design to engage students beyond the classroom. Oftentimes it's as simple as an interview. So we have one writing class, one instructor who has students research aging and senior citizens in our society. And the students go and interview a person, and they write their life story, and then they publish a book of these different memoirs. And they publish a book means photocopies and staples, but they publish a book, and they give it back to the interviewee, and they with a couple additional copies for their family. So you think about it, they're never going to forget that project because it was very human and it was very affirming, and their words meant something to someone else outside the classroom. So that's one of many examples of a real world project. And then lastly, with diversity global learning, we feel like it's really important that educators understand some level of inclusive teaching practice. We always say it would be a shame that if you got the design of the project and the course content really well, but didn't, treat students with respect. So that's the last leg of the three-legged stool for diversity global learning courses, is that we apply inclusive best practices as we're learning, as we're able. We're students as well. And so we do that. One resource that we love, and I have 2 minutes left, is Dollar
It's in the chat.
Okay, Dollar Street. It's so cool. So we like to come up with assignment ideas, things that you might enjoy. Joellen, do you want to share that, and I'll stop sharing? Do you have it up?
Well, I just put the link in there.
I'm gonna get out of the PowerPoint and pull up Dollar Street.
Okay.
And if you want to talk about it, that would be awesome.
Sure. So the Gapminder website, we love it because it is so interdisciplinary. I mean, pretty much any discipline can use this. And when she pulls it up, it is a family, and oh gosh, what's their last name? Rosling, something like that. And they, and many of you may have seen some of the videos online. It does TED Talks, but the daughter-in-law, doesn't matter because I don't have enough time, but the daughter-in-law decided to use pictures as data to try to take this world that we live in and show it in a way where you can look at these different families, and they pour to the rich and all across the world. So you can look at a family in Haiti who I think it's monthly income, or is it weekly? I forget. Anyway, I haven't done it for a while, but you click on this and you can do these comparatives. But you can look at the toothbrush from each family. You can look at a comparison of what everybody's bed looks like. You can, but then there's statistical analysis where pull up,
I just clicked on Haiti since you mentioned Haiti.
okay, thank you. I was gonna say, this will get us a little deeper into it. And I know we don't really have time to do this, but it's super fabulous. This is just a real family who said, hey, I am willing, oh, thank you. It's Hans Rosling. And Ola is the son, and then his wife is actually the one that's in charge of this Gapminder. And so the photographers go out to these different communities and they say, hey, you know, and they take a picture and they have these categories. So you can look at a kitchen, what it looks like in Korea, what it looks like in Haiti, what it looks like in the US. There's just really a richness for me as a visual learner to be able to see these comparisons. Students can go in there, you can have them do all kinds of different research projects and look at where do you think you fit on this, you know, spectrum, or where do you see differences, where do you see things that are very similar. What you cook with, the cooking pots are pretty fascinating too. Toothbrushes to me are fabulous. Then the toilets, let's not get into that, but it's very interesting to see what identified different toilets and so forth. So, but anyway, it's a fabulous resource to explore difference and sameness, which I always like to talk about sameness the most, but that's just me. I'm going to put in our chat again. We have a link to ppcc.edu/HIPS. I've put it in a couple times. I'll put it in again. That will get you to all kinds of resources that we have at Pikes Peak. You're welcome to take a peek and see if there's anything of value for you. It also will give you an opportunity. You can email us if you have questions for us. Thank you.
I'd love to say too, just thank you for being here. And we would love to talk with you if you are already doing some of this at your college. Maybe we can get a little consortium going around high impact practices in Colorado in CCCS. So yeah, we're hips at ppcc.edu and hope to see you around.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn and Bruce, for all your chat stuff. That was very helpful.
Thank you all. Yeah. Oh, hi, Jackie. I didn't get to see who all was here.
I know. I didn't even peek. There were a lot. It was good to see lots of faces.
I feel like this is just an example of how I wish there was more cross-college collaborations.
Yeah.
Other people have so many good ideas.
Right.
I too. I want to start like a resource that we, yeah. So Stacy, let's keep in touch.
She said she emailed us already, so that's awesome.
Oh, did I? No.
Was that you? I thought as Stacy said, I emailed you. Maybe it wasn't you.
I may have gotten multiple emails during this presentation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I need like a reflective practice group, like a CCCS wide reflective practice group.
Seriously. Yeah.
Others.
I always say that if you get teachers talking to each other about teaching, all of us get better.
Absolutely.
We started, I mean, I know I'm not the presenter, I can run away, but we started so Front Range has 3 campuses and I don't see the other 2 campuses like ever.
Yeah.
But now that everyone's virtual, we've been invited to like more meetings that we couldn't go to in person.
Uh-huh.
And so we've had this, the math department at the other campus started this math chat that meets weekly. And we have like specific focuses, but I feel like I've learned so much and it's been so valuable talking to other people that I never would have talked to before, whose names I didn't even know before. And now I'm just like,
absolutely.
Oh, I have to ask this person first. Like that's my.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, us too. We have, 3 main campuses online and all different sites, military and high school. So this has been kind of wonderful to be able, I can't wait to see people in person, but to be able to chat.
There is some
Online.
silver lining.
Yeah.
There's some silver lining, and mostly gray cloud, but I think we'll
Yeah.
continue. People are much more comfortable with WebEx and Zoom than ever before. So, and it's more inclusive. We can get, you know, if we have a cool event, we should be able to invite anybody in system to join us, if it, you know, would work. Yes, Bruce.
Hey, there's a question in the
Hi,
chat.
Bruce.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, there's a question in the chat for y'all of how they just think there's only 2 of you doing this at Pikes Peak Community College.
Oh.
Can you please share the scope of what
Yeah.
it is that we're doing?
Yeah,
How many
we did.
faculty are involved?
You may
Yeah.
have missed it. You may have missed it. We did share that we have 61% of our faculty reporting using high impact practices, and that's about 500 educators. So yeah, the scope is pretty amazing. Thank you for that, Bruce, and you're one of them who
Yes,
rocks
you
it.
are.
Yes. No, thank you. That was a really good point.